All right. Welcome back, everybody. Big crowd. You guys make it easy to get applause lines. I just have to say welcome back. It's my pleasure to introduce A.J. Johnson as the next speaker. She works for American Atheists, but that's not really the beginning. That's kind of the end of the story. She was raised Baptist in the Bible Belt and actually went to a private Christian elementary school first. Eventually transitioned into secular education, including the University of North Carolina at Chapel Hill, my own alma mater, where she was the assistant director of development for their scholarships. This helped her get a job at American Atheists, making the full transition from Baptist and Bible Belt to professional atheist. And she, yeah. And she's here to talk about why the Christians keep winning and how to stop them.
Thank you, Jesse. Thank you all for being here. I do appreciate it. I hope to not disappoint. And the first thing I want to say is that this is not by any means an exhaustive presentation on all the strategies that the Christians use and all the strategies that we should employ. I mainly talked about really a lot of the fraud that's going on, what they're doing to subvert the system and how they're getting over on us. I kind of summed it up in my head as the Christians are screwing everyone over and we're screwing ourselves over by not being more combative in certain ways. So I think that's basically the first part. Oh, there we go. So Jesse covered a bit of my introduction there. I was religious. I did go to a religious elementary school. My family is still religious. And it was a bit of an awkward thing for me when I, hit puberty and realized I was bisexual and black and Christian. And that just, I read the Bible. I saw that God, in fact, does hate fags. And I used that on purpose to be inflammatory because it's kind of how he feels. I think Westboro has kind of hit the nail on the head, at least, in that respect. I went to college at UNC. I was active there with the GLBTSA program. I was active with their Secular Student Alliance after I graduated, actually. And the way that I transitioned is kind of an interesting story. I took a class with Bart Ehrman, and I talked to him. I took him out to lunch, and I said, I really want to get more involved. I want to get off the bench. I'm an atheist, and I want to be an atheist activist. And he put me in touch with Ed Buckner, who was the former president of American Atheists. And I told Ed, black, bisexual, I have a bit of development experience. Do you have anywhere to put me? And they said, yes, for sure we do. So that's how I came to be involved with American Atheists. A few caveats and CYAs. I am just one person and one perspective. I'm sure there are as many perspectives as there are people in this room, so please keep that in mind. And also, just for the Q&A session later, I am talking for myself, not necessarily for American Atheists. So one gripe that I have, and I think this is a really big thing, this is a part of an overarching issue that we have. We are very nervous that we might be perceived as religious. We're very nervous that if we do things that religious organizations do, then that makes us a religion, or that other people might think that we are. So the one thing that I really want to get across is that gatherings like this, or gatherings that are in a brick and mortar building that's for atheism or secularism or skepticism, they're not religious. They're gatherings. This is what humans do. We should not cede that ground to religions to let them take dominion over people getting together over shared interests. So I want to really drive that home. I hear this all the time. If we have buildings, if we build, whole organizations, if we meet every week, then we're just like religions. No, we're not. We're just like other organizations that have been successful, like ACT UP. We're just like Toastmasters. They do public speaking. They're not called religions. No one else has to deal with this issue. Alcoholics Anonymous has weekly meetings, and no one says although they are, they do have that religious element, but they're not called a religion. So let's try to stay away from that if we can. That if there's one thing you get away from it, it would be to not cede humanity, elements of what makes us people, to religion. Don't give them that. So The one other place that I think that religions are getting over us is the legislative and the way that they address policy. They're very uniform and they're very good at what they do in this area. I'm going to get to it in a few other places, but I really want to highlight the importance of the Secular Coalition for America and the importance of us getting involved, us lobbying. Go to the lobby days, talk to your congressmen and your senators, get involved in that way, because you can bet your behind that the Christians are writing letters. So if you write a letter, it does the least bit just to let your congressperson know that you're a constituent and that your voice should be heard too. So I-990s. Does anyone know what an I-990 is? Okay, so this is really the meat of what I'm talking about today, and this is actually my biggest call to action. An I-990 is a form that a nonprofit organization must file every year with the IRS. It says what they're using their money for, and it's essentially a basic document that, you get tax-exempt status, tell us what you're doing with it. It's not all that complicated, but it's important. And all nonprofit organizations, except churches, have to turn these in. So that's the real thing. You get your nonprofit status, you turn in these I-990s, and you just can't advocate for or against a particular candidate. And those are the rules. You can still go for issues and things like that, but you can't say, don't vote for Mitt Romney or don't vote for Barack Obama or do that kind of thing. So the logic here is that, you're paying taxes. Paying taxes to the government would be an overreach for religion. It would somehow breach the separation of church and state for these organizations that are religious to have to pay taxes. I threw the Mormon Church up there because I think that they're a good example of a legally dubious endeavor. They spent over $22 million in 2008 on Proposition 8, trying to get that overturned, and they were successful. That gay marriage was overturned in California because of, in part, due to all that money that they threw into it. So a few other examples that a lot of people don't know about are parsonages, which is a fancy word for the money that clergy gets to live. This is not tax. They get tax-free money from the government. They don't have to file on what they get from the collection plate. They don't have to do anything with that. They also get housing tax exempt. They don't have to pay taxes on their housing at all. So you can imagine if you're an unscrupulous clergy person, how you might be able to game the system even more with provisions like this in place. The logic here is kind of dodgy. It was in 1921 that they set this up, and they said that it was to help clergy afford housing because they're low paid. But all nonprofit workers are not really paid that well. So I would promote, SSA employees or AA employees or Doctors Without Borders or can we get some tax-free money? Is that cool? No, of course it's not. But that's the whole thing. They somehow think that just because they're low income, which I don't even really believe, that they somehow get that benefit. Here's another interesting one, the education. So religious organizations are funneling money into education programs through this, it's kind of, so if you make a donation to a religious organization, they're kind of the middle person, but they're not, you're making a donation to a student tuition fund, but they actually get some control over that. They can say that it goes to this religious college, or some cases even to this specific student. So it's no longer a charitable donation because it's being funneled to a religious institution or to a specific person, but they're still getting the tax break for it. And I want just to take a minute and say, you all pay taxes. You have to fund the government either through sales taxes, your income taxes, payroll taxes for business owners. So this is money that's coming out of your pockets. It's not some abstract thing. To balance the budget, you all have to cough up more money because these people are not coughing up enough or their share. So that's the real point. Don't think of it as, tax breaks or this. This is money coming out of your pocket. This is real money that needs to be into the budget that's not being put there. So both of these programs, funnel money into these areas, and they get tax-free, their tax-deductible benefits from it. So there's an estimated $34 billion in fraud in 2011, and only $31 billion on global mission work. This is interesting because these statistics actually come from other Christians that are upset at this. Because, as you can imagine, there are tons more good Christians than fraudulent ones, and they don't want to see these statistics. They don't want to know that they're paying into a system that's defrauding the government and the constituents of all of these different organizations. So they actually, when I was at the Religious News Conference last year, actually had really good conversations with a few Christians that were saying, we want to help too. We agree with you insofar as we understand that churches are being fraudulent and that we want to stop it too. So we do have some allies on that side that also don't want fraud in the system. So I think that that's a place that we can probably find some common ground. I threw some examples up there from from across the globe, some really egregious ones. In Italy, believe it or not, the Vatican may be corrupt. I don't know if that surprises anyone. So they seized 23 million euro from a Vatican account, and this is a bit of an older story, but recently in the news, the Vatican has been having some issues as well. They also in Brazil seized 2 billion, and in the United States, Oral Roberts, a former resigned former accountant, actually says that their board of trustees that is laundering a significant $1 billion a year. With this, I mean, and this is still tax. I mean, there's some implications that we all have with this money. So that's significant, and that's here in the United States. Here's some other forms of fraud that I didn't know about. So you can claim your house is a church, and then you don't have to pay taxes on your house because it's a church. So that was done. A realtor did that. He converted his $3 million house into a church, saying that his wife needed a place to worship, and then he had the tax shelter from that. So there's also self-dealing. So you can have a nonprofit and a for-profit branch of the same church, and so you can have goods that are sold by the for-profit entity at a wholesale price to the nonprofit entity, or vice versa. And you claim that you really bought it at full price. So there's a mismatch in the amount of money, and the profit just disappears, does whatever it does. It just doesn't get claimed. So the self-dealing is also a really big problem. And the last one is excessive compensation, just paying these people entirely too much money. This example, 1.7 million, is the highest example of someone that actually filed one of those I-990s, of a group that filed that. All of the other churches, you just don't have to file it. They just, out of the goodness of their heart, or because their constituents enforce that, or otherwise, they decided to file this, and that's what was found. The Charlotte News Observer actually reported this story. But that means, I mean, there are tons of other people that are being compensated far more than this that don't have to fill out any forms to say so. So 1.7 million seems like a lot, but it didn't seem like a lot to them. For whatever reason, they still wouldn't filed that, so they didn't think it was egregious. So just imagine how much more other people are being paid that aren't filing. Pop quiz. Okay, question 1. Which religious group actually has the highest percentage of tithers, meaning people that give more than 10% of their income? You're brilliant. All right. So I had a few other just teasers there. Only 9% of born-again Christian adults and 24% of evangelical Christians tithe, give more than 10%. 90% of Mormons, 90% of these people give more than 10% of their income to their church. Now, I'm not asking all of you to give 10% of your income. But if you can cough up a bit, I mean, this is what we're up against. This is the kind of dedication, these are the kind of figures. They're throwing $22 million into out-of-state elections about gay marriage. What else are they doing, and what else could they be doing? I mean, this is an absurd amount of money that's being put into this religious organization without any accountability. And they're doing things with it that affect our policy and affect our lives. Second question, I guess I gave it away. But I say that to say, not to say that there's a direct correlation between the money that's being tithed and the fact that Mitt Romney is a candidate, but the Mormons have had an awareness campaign and an acceptance campaign, and they've really been trying to make the word Mormon not a dirty word. And we also have that shared goal of trying to make the word atheist not a dirty word. So I think that we can at least learn something from the gains that they've been able to have. We don't have an atheist candidate. There's certainly something to be learned from what they've been able to do. The Mormons were persecuted. They were asked to leave multiple states because of their polygamy, which they just deny now and act like it's not a big deal. But, they actually do have a history of oppression, and so do we. So, I think there are certainly analogies there. Not the magic underwear, though. So I want to start with the bad news. The bad news is that $96 billion of the $218 billion given to charitable organizations in 2011 was given to religious organizations. So that's almost half. And that's money that, again, is not going into our national coffers. That's money that's not being accounted for. And that's money that we're not necessarily reproducing on the other side of things. Not just secular atheist organizations, but secular organizations, period. This is everything. These are, universities, art programs, parks that are, nonprofit. This is everything. And if religious organizations are getting that much of a lion's share, then that means that the tax breaks that could be going to these things that help everyone are just going to these things that hurt a lot of other people. So we have to keep that in mind, that they're giving at a rate that is obscene. And again, I'm not asking for 10% of your income, but I want you to know that this is what we're up against. So what you can give, you should, because the fight, it will not be won if we can't fund it. The good news. The rise of the nuns. This is something I won't even spend a lot of time on because I know you all are familiar with it. 2008 Eris poll says that nuns are growing, non-religious, including atheist, agnostic, and just people identify as non-religious. And that's actually the biggest part of that, people that identify as non-religious. So, of course, this is not a victory in and of itself. As many other people in the movement have said, it's an opportunity. We have to get these people before they marry religious and have kids and it's over, because that's just complicated. So we have to get these people that are still kind of in the middle, still deciding where they fit in, and give them a community, give them a place to go, a place where they can find like-minded people, a place that they can fight for ideas and policy standpoints that they agree with. If we don't give them a place to go and they're just hanging out in the ether, we can't be surprised when they find a nice Christian boy or girl, marry them, and then go, oh, I guess I'll go to church. That's what they want. That's what's going to, make my spouse happy, if we don't give them a community as an option. The LGBT movement, making great strides. I think this is definitely our model here, and I think so for a few reasons. I think because religiosity is the only reason they're being oppressed, and because they're an invisible identity. And that means that when they walk around in the street, barring, I guess, wearing rainbows and all kinds of other things, but just walking down the street, they can exist in society without being identified as LGBT. And we, walking down the street, don't have to disclose that we're atheists. So by coming out, which is what the LGBT movement advocated, they've been able to, get gay marriage passed and repealed in a lot of places, but they've really made great advancements. I mean, our president has said that he supports gay marriage. If our president said he supports, instead of just including us in a list of other things that he's, president to, including non-religious people in the list after Catholics and all these other things, if he said, I support atheists, how phenomenal. I mean, that's something that we can really look forward to. So one day, I hope to get that kind of thing from the president, but it's a long way off because so many other people don't want to say atheists. If the gays didn't want to say gay, they wouldn't be where they are right now. The last bit of good news for this slide is that individual donations are actually up, and donations to churches are down. It's very slight, and they're still the lion's share, but things are moving in that direction, and hopefully will continue to do so. Here's an interesting chart. It's got the different income levels, and what I want you to see here, so first of all, the people that make over $500,000 give the most amount of their income, but they have a lot of it. And they're getting tax breaks for it. Not to say it's not awesome, it is. And of course, if you're making over $500,000, please see me after I finish talking. But what I really want to drive home is that the people in the lower income brackets are also giving at a comparable rate. And what's so interesting about this is that they don't get to claim these deductions on their taxes because they don't do itemized. So the way that the IRS works is you have to make a certain amount of money and give a certain amount of money to itemize your taxes. And most of these people in the lower brackets don't do that. So they're giving money charitably. And that's what I want everyone to see, that a lot of people give a significant amount of their income, even though they don't have a significant income comparatively to some of the other people that give a lot as well. So the Pension Protection Act of 2006 doesn't seem like, why would I be talking about? What does pension have to do with this conversation? It's really just kind of a miscellaneous reform act, but what it did, and what I really want us to do and kind of expand this, is it made organizations that make less than $25,000 actually file I-990s, that form that I was mentioning before. And the effect of this was profound. In 3 years, because it said if you don't file for 3 consecutive years, you lose your tax-exempt status. 275,000 organizations lost their tax-exempt status simply by not turning in that form. So if we could just get them to make the churches turn in the form, we could probably get a lot of churches to lose their tax-exempt status because they don't want to come up. They don't want to say, this is how much we spent on this is how much we spent on that. So that's, and I'll talk a bit more about that later, but that's really what I want. The Pension Protection Act of 2006. But getting churches to file their taxes, that's the real thing that I want to try to get out of that. And since we know that they can change and have recently, in 2006, changed who files and why, we know that we can actually get them to do it again, potentially. And also, 84% of Americans give. That's awesome. I mean, on the whole, we are actually quite charitable. That's a lot of people. And even if they're giving 20, 30, 40 bucks to one organization or two, that's still significant. And I just want to, applaud you all, whoever does give and whoever doesn't and is thinking about it. You have a lot of company there. This is another chart. It's just kind of going from the 90s to 2008, the ARIS poll, and it's just showing the difference, showing how many people are now non-religious. I don't know okay, it's pretty clear up there. Of note to me is the African-American numbers. A lot of people say, why aren't there more black people in the movement? Why aren't there more black atheists? Well, we're growing at about the same rate as everyone else. There are a lot of other reasons, because contending with African-American, culture and identity is its own burden. So to ask people to add atheism onto it is asking them to do something that they don't necessarily have to do. We were talking about that invisible identity thing. But even still, we're growing right along there, so it's positive. Okay, so how the Christians win. Kind of covered this. Special privileges and outright cheating. They cheat. They're not playing the game fair. And I'm not saying that we need to not play the game fair to beat them, but we need to be aware that they're not playing fair. We shouldn't assume that they're actually going to stay in color between the lines when we've been given no reason to think that that's the case. There's examples of all those examples of fraud. There's tons more where that came from. I could have done a whole presentation on religious fraud had I wanted to. And there's also this way that they're reclaiming veterans and statesmen as if they were actually religious when they were either deistic or even more secular. So rewriting history, another thing I don't think that we should do, but something we need to know that the other side is doing. This is how they're winning. They're muddying the waters by filling it with misinformation, with bad history. Another thing is that they have long-term goals and priorities, and they don't get bogged down with other things. They're very good at saying, we want this at this time, and getting everyone together, and they don't really argue about semantics. They say Christian. Dave Silverman actually gives a really good presentation about why we should say atheist, because when was the last time you heard someone say Baptist or Presbyterian had you not asked, what specific sect of Christian are you? Most of them say Christian. If the question being asked is, do you believe or do you not believe, or what do you believe as far as a deistic sense, the answer is atheist. You might have a secular standpoint when it comes to, legislation, that kind of thing. You might be a humanist when it comes to relating to your peers and other people, but you don't buy the God stuff. Let's not quibble, because we're then helping them muddy the waters by dividing and conquering ourselves. So I found this online, and it's a picture of Pat Tillman. And Pat Tillman was an atheist, and his name, after he died from friendly fire, was dragged through the mud. I say that because they said that he was Christian. They said that he was a believer. At his funeral, they had all these blessings and all of this, and his brother actually got up and said, he's dead. He didn't believe any of that. But below it is a quote from George H.W. Bush saying that atheists are not even, shouldn't be considered citizens at all. And that was, 25 years ago? This is still something we're contending with. Just being considered citizens. You could go and fight and die for your country and still not be able to be who you are, because who you are is antithetical to the perception of conservatives and what it means to be an American. How we lose. Again, we cede so much unnecessary ground. We are so worried that we not be a religion, that we aren't a movement in a lot of ways, that we can't come together around common ideas and realize that we need to leave some of the BS behind to get the goals that we want to achieve done. And I think that that's the real thing. Let's not, if religions meet, then let's meet. Sure. We're not meeting because religions meet. Religions meet, and we will meet too. It's not as if to do one thing or another is to make us more of a religion. And again, when we don't identify as atheists, and when we just fight with each other about, I'm not picking one thing or another. It's either the semantics of it. It's either whether or not, gay issues are something we should be focused on, whether or not women's choice issues are something we should be focused on. And I think that these things are something we need to talk about, have a discussion, but then do them, actually take strides to make differences instead of just talking around an echo chamber. Okay, so next steps: come out, stay out, donate, volunteer. If you don't have the money to give your time, give your expertise. We need people to be involved in the movement in one way or the other. And again, the legislative push that I really want is the I-990s. If we can get them to file I-990s, so many of them will just be defunct. So many of them won't be able to do it. They don't want to. They would actually rather not have the tax deductible status than tell their constituents that they've been fraud. They've been frauding them for so long. So I think that's really where we should put our energies if I had to pick someplace. Any questions or anything like that? Okay, well, thank you all. I appreciate it.